Conga drums, rototoms, and sometimes buckets and cans. The percussive beat that is go-go music has become the soundtrack to the city. We're previewing a new movie on DC's music genre.
Plus, she's recognized as a living legend. We catch up with America's first African-American female impressionist, Sylvia Traymore Morrison.
Those stories coming up. The news rundown is straight ahead. We Are Washington starts now.
Welcome to We Are Washington. It's the sound of D.C., and go-go has a history that's as unique and inspiring as the city itself. Coming up, we'll take an inside look at an ambitious new movie that tells a story of go-go from the musicians who have been keeping D.C. crankin' for decades.
And another D.C. original, Dr. Sylvia Traymore Morrison, the country's first African-American impressionist, was honored at Ben's Chili Bowl as a living legend. The entertainer has a career that spans 50 years and includes getting her first break with Red Fox, writing for SNL, and touring with Whitney Houston. We'll find out what goes into doing an impression with special appearances from Whoopi Goldberg and Wendy Williams. All of that's coming up, but first, here's the news rundown. Mayor Bowser was one of the featured speakers at the 2018 National Alliance on Ending Homelessness Conference. The three-day event brings together 2,000 government leaders, advocates, and service providers to find innovative solutions to ending homelessness.
We set out early in my tenure as mayor a bold vision to end homelessness, period, without equivocation, without a lot of caveats. We said that in a city as prosperous as ours, that we could end homelessness with political will and a lot of bold plans, but also persistence and consistency.
The D.C. Department of Human Services, Community of Hope, and landlord partner E&G Group were honored at the conference for their joint work to reduce overall homelessness in Washington. The transformation of the former Walter Reed Army Medical Center continues with a new housing development for seniors.
Mayor Bowser helped break ground on the Abrams Hall senior apartments, which will provide 80 affordable units for district seniors. The apartments are being developed in a building originally constructed in 1976 as barrack housing for soldiers.
Oftentimes, when we hear about plans, sometimes the actuality of those plans doesn't live up to the promises. But as I heard the things that have already happened just in the last 3 years, I know that the best is yet to come.
Now, I have the privilege to represent the second highest number of seniors in the whole city, and that is a big part of my agenda, is how can we make sure that our seniors can afford to live in this ward, can afford to live in this city.
12 contestants proved age is but a number as they competed in the 18th annual Ms. American Classic Woman of the Year pageant. The 3-hour extravaganza at Lincoln Theater had everything you'd expect from a pageant, including a talent and evening gown portion. But in the end, it was Ms. Betty Ensminger of Ward 8 who was crowned the Queen of D.C. So congratulations to Betty.
Living the legacy of Nelson Mandela was the theme of the 4th annual Young African Connection Summit. The summit is part of the Mayor's Office on African Affairs Youth Engagement and Multicultural Awareness Program. Participants included Mandela Washington Fellows based at Howard University, policymakers, civic leaders, and community members.
They're given Madiba's legacy, given his history of overcoming great hardship and becoming as great a leader as he ended up being. It really speaks to taking the moment and not shrinking from your responsibilities when it comes to leadership.
2018 marks the 100th anniversary of Nelson Mandela's birth in South Africa.
District entrepreneurs enjoyed some coffee and capital thanks to the D.C. Department of Insurance, Securities, and Banking, or DISB. The event was designed to give residents an opportunity to learn more about innovative financing programs available through DISB to local small businesses.
Burgers on the grill and police officers jamming on stage, all part of MPD's Family Fun Day in Anacostia Park. The event was also a chance for the community to learn about MPD's cadet program, which works with students from D.C. high schools or GED programs and helps get them on the road to becoming a metropolitan police officer. 65 D.C. police cadets and their families enjoyed the festivities as part of Family Fun Day.
D.C. cat count is underway in the district with the goal of counting every single kitty in the nation's capital, both pets and strays. The project is expected to take 3 years and will depend in part on information gathered from 60 camera traps with infrared sensors. Animal advocacy groups are funding the $1.5 million project in order to learn how to better manage the cat population in the district.
If you're a fan of the 1984 cult classic mockumentary Spinal Tap, you won't want to miss Q&A Cafe with Carol Joint. Harry Shearer sits down for an interview fully in character as bassist Derek Smalls to discuss his life as an aging rock star.
And when you play Glastonbury Festival, 130,000 people, and in Wembley Arena, 18,000 people sold out, no seat to be had. You think, here we go, right, here we go, tap 3.0. And I'm sitting in my flat waiting for the phone to ring.
Yeah.
And it doesn't ring. And so I do the natural thing. I ring up the telephone company. And they said, it's not us.
You can catch Q&A Cafe Fridays at 8 p.m. right here on DCN. All right, a lot happening, a lot to cover on the news recap today. Let's start right where we left off with Q&A Cafe and that interview with Derek Smalls. Are you a fan of Spinal Tap? Have you seen the movie?
I have to admit, I haven't seen the movie, but actually watching some of that interview made me want to see the movie because it was so entertaining.
It is, and I know Carol spoke with Michael McKeon, who's an actor who was also a part of Spinal Tap before too. Very good interview. This was very funny. Just that part where he's talking about waiting for the phone to ring. I mean,
it doesn't.
Very reminiscent of what Spinal Tap is all about.
I wanted to mention that I'm so fascinated by this DC cat count.
How can you not be, right?
I mean, the thought of like really trying to get an accurate count of every single stray and feral and pet cat in the nation's capital. It's a big undertaking, but you can see how the information that they are potentially getting from this project could be very helpful. Just because so little is known about what goes on in the cat world and how to and what we can do to kind of make better policy about managing it.
I have a feeling they're going to find out a lot about the movement of these cats.
I think they're going to find out a little bit more than just about cats. I think they're going to catch some other things on those cameras too.
You're probably right. You're right. Well, don't go anywhere. We're bringing you the inside scoop on a new movie that tells some of the untold history of the sound of DC.
And later, we'll find out what it takes to impersonate everyone from Diana Ross to Melania Trump, from a DC legend who's been delighting audiences for decades.
Welcome back to We Are Washington. For nearly 4 decades, the sound of DC has been defined by the relentless percussive rhythm created by congos, rototoms, and in some specific cases, buckets and cans. Of course, we're talking about go-go music, and over the course of the last year here at the Office of Cable Television, Film, Music, and Entertainment, we've been building a full-length documentary, and while still in production, today we're getting an exclusive sneak peek into this project that explores DC's go-go history. I'm joined now by the director, producer, all-around creative force, I guess we could say, Jean Thorpe, who's been involved with the project. Jean, thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Man. Thanks.
All right, so first thing, talk to 50 different artists, promoters, photographers, fans, everybody who's really around this music and who's enthusiastic about it and passionate about it. So in the course of those conversations, what did you learn?
Probably the single biggest thing that floored me that I learned was Max Kidd was the biggest promoter in town. He was the one who got all the go-go bands on the radio.
Back in the original days?
Back in the original in around 1985.
Okay.
He got a deal with Chris Blackwell and Island Records. And I knew that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The deal was for $6 million.
Wow.
That's like 60 million in today's money. That was the single biggest thing that flew. I knew he got the deal.
Right.
But I didn't know how big that deal was.
I know that the tagline for the movie is a brief history. So give us a brief history about how you see it and how you see it unfolding in this movie.
Go-Go began in the early 70s, and it came out of the cabaret culture of bands performing. DC has always been a live music town. So Go-Go came out of that, and it was Chuck Brown who had the idea to have his percussion section keep playing in between the top 40 songs that he played. And the younger people latched on to the break part. The break part became popular. So instead of becoming sort of a sideline, over time, it became the show.
So it developed that way, and it's really progressed over the years. So after that initial period of time, in the 70s and the 80s, and then we start getting into the third and fourth decade that this music has been around, how has it really evolved since then? What have you learned about go-go music in the process of making this movie?
The path of go-go music follows the path of many other musics. The same things that you heard about happening in punk music, where it has its rise and then it has its sort of crest and it has its fall. That same trajectory happened here too. These bands are able to do the equivalent of a national tour, just as many dates, without going anywhere.
With staying in the region.
Staying right here in the region.
How has it progressed? What are you laying out for everybody to see?
The number one thing we wanted to lay out with this is I wanted the band members and the band people to tell you the story of go-go. That was the number one priority with this.
All right, well, we do have a short clip that we'd like to share, so here is a clip from Straight Crankin.
Who would you say were the first 5 go-go bands?
First 5?
First 5?
Rare Essence.
Mass Extinction, Reds and the Boys.
Peacemakers.
Young Senators.
Of course, you start with Chuck Brown.
I started singing in the church and playing piano when I was about 7 years old.
Trouble Funk. Trouble Funk, first of all original stuff.
It started as Trouble Band and Show.
This band ain't nothing but a whole lot of trouble.
EU was just, they was different.
I got the name Experience Unlimited from Jimi Hendrix Experience.
Junkyard was definitely.
For a lot of years, even when they got on, they still played on them buckets.
And then you had this upstart band called Rare Essence.
You know, the fact that we were able to do our own record and get it into the record stores while we were still at that age.
Max Kidd was probably one of the best promoters, record promoters in Washington, D.C.
Max Kidd got into it, and he took credit for everything that I had did.
In our business, sometimes people get in their own way.
Good to Go fell short of his expectations. The music scene was down and it needed a lift.
Go-Go, from the go-go capital of the world, Washington, D.C.
And I went on first, and that was it. And they kept it on the Go-Go Live tape, and it became a classic.
To me, that was like our Super Bowl.
When we were out there being the ambassadors for Go-Go,
I was a baby. My brother had all the cassette tapes. You gotta be a student of the game.
It's our responsibility to keep pushing, to keep writing music, to keep performing.
If you don't know where you come from, you sure enough don't know where you're going.
So we're really going to see a lot of stories develop. You can tell just from that. There's a lot of different directions this can go in.
Yeah.
Was that one of the hard parts about doing this and just deciding what directions? How did you decide, in terms of building this, what things you were going to sort of bring to the forefront and put out there for fans to see and experience?
Well, there was a line, sort of a chronological line, where all the bands sort of started in different places, but they merged in certain places. 1985 was one of those years where everybody sort of merged, you know what I'm saying? So the idea was to take it from where each band started, get them up to 85, because that's when you had this big bubble. That's when all of this, everybody was making a lot of noise and everybody was getting a lot of attention, you know what I'm saying? So, and that led to the Go-Go Live show. To me, that's the most emotional part for me. There was 18,000 people in the largest arena this town had.
Right.
And this is just us.
Mm-hmm.
And you felt like that.
And not only that, but hadn't there been a resistance to having go-go music, not just that venue, but other venues in the city at that point in time? So that was a big deal.
Yes, it was a big deal. That event almost didn't happen.
Wow. So I was just hoping you could tell that story about how you became a fan of go-go, your first go-go experience.
The first go-go tape I heard was in the 7th grade. It was either Peacemakers or Plump Benders, one of the two.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, I couldn't go to a lot of the shows.
Which was a common problem for younger people at that time, too.
Right.
Yeah.
But I was the first kid in the neighborhood with a double cassette deck.
Ah, there it is.
I'm listening to Rare Essence, and this is like when they're coming up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I told the cast of Rare Essence, there's things that you played 30 years ago that I hear in my head right now.
Wow.
I still hear it.
Yeah.
Okay? This was a long thank you note to all of them.
Mm-hmm.
They shaped so much of what I do as a musician and as a composer, and so many things came from them.
Wow. A lot to unfold and a lot to unpack. Thanks so much for giving us this sneak preview before production's wrapped up. It's coming soon. Straight Crankin', a brief history of go-go music. When DC native Dr. Sylvia Traymore Morrison was just 5 years old, she learned that she could imitate a cricket so well that even her parents were fooled. It was a gift she honed over the years and led her to become America's first female African-American impressionist. Her career includes being managed by Red Fox, hosting a roast of Muhammad Ali, and touring with Whitney Houston. All of these years later, she's still delighting audiences with her spot-on imitations. Take a look.
You see me walking down the street and I start to cry each time we meet.
Tell me about the art of doing an impression, because I feel like you don't see it quite as much anymore, but it really is a different kind of art. So when you are thinking about somebody that you'd like to do an impression of, what are some of the steps you take when you're creating an impression?
Okay, well now let's take you for example.
No, please don't.
Because I was going to do my impression.
No, I'm dying to see this.
Well, most people have what I consider are unique and different characteristics for themselves. When they talk, you have some people that move their hands, or grab their ears, or make kind of, faces, or talk with a certain kind of mouth, and, just so.
I'm getting worried, but go ahead.
No, you're fine. And so I look for the unique, different characteristics. I watch how they bat their eyes. I watch how the direction they turn their head in. And you'd be surprised that people that know these people. For an example, Dionne Warwick, and she swears this is nothing like her. When she comes on stage and smiles, her nose holes open, her teeth start to show, and she becomes, thank you. She becomes Dionne Warwick. So Diana Ross doesn't know that maybe she does know, but she crumps it up and her face turns down and her eyes get weak and her arms go up. It's just different movements.
And it's probably things that people are not even aware that they're doing.
But for instance, with you, but I notice now with you have a potentially bursting smile. It's always there. And when you smile, your eyes close a little bit. Let me hold this for a second. Let me hold this. And when you look, and you ask questions, and you go, really? So, okay. So there was a time, and I'm like, look at her doing it. She knows.
I am sufficiently humbled now. But let me tell you, let's move on to some other impressions that I know you are really known for. For example, would it be possible, do you think we could talk to Whoopi Goldberg? I don't know. I would love to say hi to Whoopi. Excuse me, Whoopi?
Hi, what's going on? Hi, hey guys, how are you today?
Tell me, Whoopi, are you happy for Sylvia?
Man, let me tell you this. Let me tell you, I was talking to Barbara Walters earlier today, And I told Barbara I'm headed down to Ben's Chili Bowl in D.C. because they're giving her this recognition or something. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but she's there at Ben's Chili Bowl. And I'm excited. I'm very happy for her. She's a marvelous woman. She's absolutely drop-dead gorgeous. She's everything I want to be. I'm only...
Whoopi, this is so nice of you to drop by. I know you have to get back to The View. There's somebody else I'd like to talk to. One of my favorites. Okay. Ms. Wendy Williams. I know we're all a fan of Wendy Williams, and I'm sure she's a fan of Sylvia. So, Wendy, thank you so much for being here.
Oh my God, how you doing? How you doing? Okay. So I'm excited to be here at Ben's today. I'm very excited. I've actually never been here before, and it's quite a place to be. No wonder it's a Washington landmark. No wonder, you know.
Wendy, this was great of you to come down all the way to DC to be here for Dr. Sylvia Traymore Morrison's big day. Thank you so much.
I'm left with one burning question after watching that, and that is, what was it like having someone do an impression of you standing right there in front of them? Did you think it was accurate? Was it weird? Tell me about that.
It was accurate, and I was a little nervous, but I will say, because I have 2 teenagers who imitate me all the time, I was probably a little bit more prepared than most people, and I do think she did a good job.
Okay.
And, she really did pick up on some things. It's the same kinds of things that actually my daughters pick up on too. But I think it's interesting, she's really good at just finding those unique characteristics that everybody has that they might not be aware of, and kind of just making it very obvious.
You have to be observant, a good listener. Obviously, you have to be a little bit courageous, to be able to do that in front of people.
Well, that's all the time we have for this show, but we do have time for one last thing.
So this is a cool story. Another chance for DC to be first at something. The company Starbucks announced that they're going to be opening, well, they're not opening, they're going to be changing their 8th Street location here in Washington, D.C. To an American Sign Language centered store, which means that employees who work there are all going to be people who are trained in sign language.
And I've been to that Starbucks on 8th Street. It's pretty busy, but as you and I know, being close to Union Market and Gallaudet, we've seen how Union Market employs a lot of workers who are deaf and hard of hearing. It's a great benefit for both those communities.
Sure. Well, that is all the time that we have for today, but we want to thank you for joining us and remind you can check out more of our shows on YouTube. While you're there, don't forget to hit subscribe, search Entertain DC.
See you next time.